The door slammed with a finality that echoed through Theo's chest like a gunshot. "Get out and don't ever come back," his father had snarled, the words burning into his memory as he stood on the rain-soaked porch at 18. His coming out met with disgust and disownment that shattered his world in an instant. Theo clutched the strap of his old backpack, the one his mother had bought for his high school graduation just months earlier, now stuffed with whatever clothes he could grab before the shouting started. Seattle's November drizzle soaked through his thin jacket as he walked away from the only home he had ever known. The house on Maple Lane fading behind him like a bad dream he couldn't wake from. He spent the first night in a shelter downtown, the kind where volunteers handed out blankets and whispered encouragement that felt hollow against the ache in his ribs. By morning, Theo had already decided he would not crawl back. He enrolled in community college on a scholarship he had quietly applied for weeks before the confrontation, majoring in computer science because numbers never judged him the way his parents had. Days blurred into nights of ramen noodles and late shifts at a campus coffee shop, where the smell of espresso became his new constant. Then Victor walked in one rainy afternoon, shaking water from his blonde hair and ordering a black coffee with a smile that cut straight through the fog. "Rough day?" Victor asked, sliding a tip into the jar even though Theo hadn't smiled back yet. They talked between customers. Victor was a literature major with dreams of writing screenplays, the kind of guy who quoted poetry like it was everyday conversation. Within weeks they were study partners, then friends who stayed up arguing about films until the library closed. The night Victor kissed him under the glow of a street lamp near the dorms, Theo felt something he hadn't known since childhood: safety. Years passed in a steady climb. Theo transferred to the University of Washington, graduated with honors, and landed an entry-level coding job at a small tech firm in downtown Seattle. Victor finished his degree and started working as a freelance editor, their tiny apartment in Capitol Hill filling with books and half-finished code on whiteboards. Theo's parents never called, never texted, not even on holidays. He told himself it was better this way, that the silence proved he had been right to leave. But late at night, when Victor slept beside him, Theo still woke sometimes with the echo of his father's voice ringing in his ears. Grandfather Harlan had been the quiet exception. The old man lived 2 hours away in a modest house outside Olympia, and though he never spoke openly about Theo's sexuality, he had always left the porch light on whenever Theo visited. They drank lemonade on the back deck and talked about baseball, never about the family rift. Theo didn't know then how much those afternoons would matter. One crisp October morning, 12 years after that slammed door, Theo's phone rang while he was debugging code at his desk. The lawyer's voice was calm and professional. "Mr. Harlan Whitaker passed away last week. You're named as the sole beneficiary of his estate. $10 million, Theo. The reading of the will is next Tuesday in San Francisco." Theo stared at the screen long after the call ended, his fingers frozen above the keyboard. Victor found him there, still sitting in the same position, and wrapped strong arms around his shoulders without a word. "Whatever this is," Victor said softly, "we face it together." The flight to California felt surreal. Theo stared out the window at the clouds below, wondering if the money would finally quiet the old pain or simply stir it back to life. He had no idea his parents had already booked their own tickets the moment they heard the news. San Francisco's fog clung to the hills like an old secret as Theo and Victor stepped out of the Uber in front of the sleek law office on Market Street. The building's glass reflected their figures. Theo in a charcoal suit Victor had helped him pick, Victor in a navy blazer that made his blue eyes stand out. Inside, the conference room smelled of polished wood and fresh coffee. A polished oak table stretched long enough to seat 20, but only a handful of chairs were occupied. Theo recognized his parents immediately. His father, Robert, had gone gray at the temples but still carried the same rigid posture that once made Theo shrink. His mother, Linda, clutched a handkerchief she didn't need, her eyes already glistening with practiced tears. They rose as he entered, arms half open as if 12 years of silence could be erased with a hug. "Theo, sweetheart," Linda began, voice cracking on cue. "We've missed you so much." He didn't move. Victor's hand rested lightly on his lower back, a steady anchor. The lawyer, M.S. Rivera, cleared her throat and began the formal reading. Harlan's will was straightforward and devastatingly clear. The entire estate, stocks, property, savings, went to Theodore Whitaker, his only grandson, who showed me what real courage looks like when the rest of the family turned away. The room went still. Robert's face flushed red. Linda's handkerchief twisted tighter. After the reading, his parents cornered him in the hallway, while Victor waited politely by the elevator. "We were wrong," Robert said, the words sounding forced through clenched teeth. "We see that now. Family is family." Linda nodded vigorously. "Your grandfather would have wanted us all together. Maybe we could talk about how to honor his memory. As a family." Their eyes kept darting to the folder in Theo's hand containing the account numbers. Theo felt the old wound reopen, raw and familiar. That evening in their hotel room overlooking the bay, Victor poured 2 glasses of wine and listened as Theo paced. "They didn't even ask how I've been," Theo said, voice tight. "It's the money. It's always been the money." Victor pulled him onto the bed, fingers tracing soothing circles on his arm. "You don't owe them anything. But if some part of you needs closure, I'm here for that too." Theo leaned into the warmth, grateful for the man who had never once made him feel like a burden. The next days blurred with paperwork and memories. Theo visited Harlan's old house in the suburbs. Now his, walking through rooms filled with faded photos and the smell of pipe tobacco. He found a shoebox in the closet stuffed with birthday cards Harlan had written but never mailed after the disownment. Each one ending with the same line, "I'm proud of the man you're becoming." Tears came then, hot and unexpected. Victor held him through it, whispering that healing didn't have to look like forgiveness. Back in Seattle, the calls started. First polite texts from his mother, then longer voicemails from his father about investment opportunities and catching up. Theo deleted them all. At work, his boss noticed the distraction and offered him a promotion to lead a new project. Perfect timing, except Theo couldn't stop wondering if the inheritance was a gift or a test. Victor suggested they take a weekend trip to the coast to clear their heads, and for 2 days they walked barefoot on cold sand, talking about everything except the parents who had suddenly remembered they had a son. The confrontation came sooner than Theo expected. 3 weeks after the will reading, his parents showed up unannounced at the Seattle apartment, suitcases in hand and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Linda carried a homemade lasagna like a peace offering. Robert shook Victor's hand with the enthusiasm of someone meeting a business partner. "We thought it was time for a real visit," Linda said, stepping inside as if she belonged there. Theo stood frozen in the doorway, the familiar scent of his mother's perfume triggering memories he had spent years burying. Dinner was tense. Victor kept the conversation light, asking about their flight, but Robert kept steering it back to the inheritance. "Your grandfather was a wise man, but he didn't understand how family works together," Robert said between bites. "We could help you manage that money. Investments, maybe a family foundation." Theo set his fork down carefully. "You mean you want to share?" The word hung in the air like smoke. Linda's eyes welled up again. "We just want to be part of your life again, Theo. Is that so wrong?" Later that night, after his parents had been given the guest room, Theo and Victor sat on the fire escape under a blanket of stars. "I feel like I'm 18 again," Theo admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Victor pulled him closer. "You're not. You're the man who built this life without them. Whatever you decide, it's your choice." Theo thought about the LGBT youth center he had quietly started donating to last year, the one that gave kids like him a safe place to land. The money could do so much more there. The following morning brought the first real fight. Robert cornered Theo in the kitchen while Victor was out getting coffee. "That boyfriend of yours seems nice, but blood is blood. Don't let some phase ruin what we can rebuild." Theo laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Phase? I've been with Victor for 8 years. He's the only family that never turned its back on me." The argument escalated until Linda appeared, crying about how they had suffered too, and how society had pressured them back then. Theo felt the old guilt rise, the voice inside him whispering that maybe he had been too harsh. Victor returned to find Theo pacing again. They talked for hours on the couch, Victor reminding him of every milestone they had achieved together. The first apartment, the night Theo got his citizenship papers for the company. The quiet proposal on a ferry ride last summer that Theo still hadn't answered out loud. "You don't have to forgive them to be kind to yourself," Victor said. Theo nodded, but the seed of doubt had been planted. That afternoon he took a long walk alone through Discovery Park, the same trails where he and Victor had first said, "I love you." The wind off the sound cleared his head enough to make a decision. He would hear them out one more time, but on his terms. The family meeting happened at a neutral cafe near Pike Place Market, the kind with exposed brick and the constant roar of espresso machines. Theo arrived with Victor at his side, a quiet show of unity that made his parents shift uncomfortably in their seats. Robert launched into a prepared speech about regret and second chances. Linda produced old photos from her purse, Theo as a toddler, the three of them smiling at Disneyland. "We were scared," she whispered. "The church, the neighbors, we thought we were protecting you." Theo listened, really listened, letting the words wash over him. Part of him wanted to believe them. The little boy inside still craved their approval. But the man he had become saw the calculations behind every tear. When Robert finally circled back to helping with the estate, Theo cut him off. "This isn't about money for me. It's about the years you threw me away." Silence fell. Victor reached under the table and squeezed his knee. That evening the tension spilled into the apartment. His mother tried one last emotional appeal, reminding Theo of holidays and birthdays missed. Victor intervened gently but firmly. "Theo has built something beautiful here. If you truly want to be part of it, you have to accept all of him, including me." Robert's face hardened. "This lifestyle, it's not what we raised." The words landed like stones. Theo stood up. "Then I guess we're done here." His parents left the next morning without goodbyes, suitcases heavier with disappointment than when they arrived. The following weeks tested Theo more than he expected. Work suffered as he replayed every conversation. Friends from the local LGBTQ+ support group, he volunteered with offered perspective, sharing their own stories of parental returns that ended in more pain. Victor suggested therapy, and for the first time Theo agreed. The sessions peeled back layers he hadn't realized were still raw. He began to see the inheritance not as a burden but as a tool, for the youth center, for scholarships, for the life he and Victor dreamed of building together. One quiet Sunday, Victor proposed properly this time, down on one knee in the same apartment where everything had started years ago. Theo said yes through happy tears. They celebrated with takeout and plans for a small wedding the following summer. The parents' visit had forced Theo to confront the past, but it had also crystallized what mattered. The family he chose, not the one that had rejected him. News of the engagement reached his parents through distant relatives. The calls resumed, this time with a new angle, his mother claiming a sudden health scare, his father hinting at financial troubles that a good son would help with. Theo recognized the manipulation now, the way guilt had always been their sharpest weapon. He changed his number and blocked their emails. Victor supported the decision without question, but Theo still lay awake some nights wondering if he was becoming the cold person they had accused him of being. Work offered a welcome distraction. The promotion came through, and Theo poured himself into leading a team developing an app for mental health resources aimed at queer youth. The project felt like purpose, a direct line from his pain to something useful. Victor edited the promotional videos on the side, their evenings filled with laughter and late-night brainstorming sessions that reminded Theo why he had fallen in love in the first place. A surprise visit from his younger cousin broke the pattern. She showed up at the office one afternoon, nervous but determined. "Aunt Linda told me everything," she said. "I just wanted you to know not all of us agree with them." They talked for hours over lunch. Her acceptance felt like a small bridge across the chasm, proof that blood didn't have to mean blind loyalty. Theo invited her to the wedding. As summer approached, Final arrangements for the ceremony took shape. A simple gathering at a vineyard outside the city with close friends and chosen family. Theo walked through the venue one afternoon, imagining Victor waiting under the arbor. The image brought peace he hadn't felt in months. But peace was fragile. His father left a voicemail on Victor's phone, blocked on Theo's, claiming the money was tearing the family apart and demanding a meeting. Victor played it for Theo that night, voice steady. "Your call," he said. Theo listened once, then deleted it. The decision felt final, like closing a book he had read too many times. The week before the wedding, Theo made one last gesture. He wired a modest sum to his parents' account, not from the inheritance but from his own savings, with a note. "This is for closure, not connection. Please respect our boundaries." No reply came. He hadn't expected one. The wedding day dawned clear and bright over the vineyard hills. Theo stood under the arbor in a light gray suit, heart pounding as Victor walked toward him, blonde hair catching the sunlight. Their vows were simple and true, promises of partnership through every storm, of choosing each other every single day. When the officiant pronounced them married, the small crowd erupted in cheers. Theo looked out at the faces, colleagues, friends from the youth center, his cousin, and felt a completeness he had never known. Months later, back in their remodeled home with a view of the bay, Theo signed the final papers transferring the bulk of the inheritance to the foundation he and Victor had established. The LGBT youth haven would offer housing, counseling, and scholarships to kids facing the same rejection he once had. Victor stood beside him at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, hand in hand, as local news cameras flashed. For the first time, Theo spoke publicly about his journey, voice steady. "I lost a family once, but I gained something stronger." His parents never reached out again. Occasional holiday cards arrived and signed, but Theo filed them away without opening. The wound had scarred over, not gone but no longer bleeding. He and Victor traveled to New York for their honeymoon, walking hand in hand through Central Park without glancing over their shoulders. Life moved forward, new projects at work, lazy Sundays cooking together, quiet plans for fostering a child someday. Looking back, Theo realized the inheritance had never been about money. It had been the final push he needed to step fully into the man he was always meant to become. Victor kissed his temple one evening as they watched the sunset from their balcony. "Proud of you," he whispered. Theo smiled, the kind of smile that reached every part of him. True or false? Blood ties outweigh years of rejection when millions are involved?